episode 6 of the ModTech Minute. Today, I'm going to talk to you about my Makerbots, and I'm going to show you some upgrades that I've made to the Replicator 2X, and show you how I did it. Thanks for tuning in. So the first thing I'm going to mention is really not an upgrade, it's just more of a way to work. I made this piece of pipe, so now I've got my filament dropping straight down, and then I used a Dremel tool to cut a groove. I put some wax paper just so it was smoother as it went through and I didn't get plastic dust. But this made it so it was so much easier to change the filament on my Replicator 2X. Alright, so here's another modification that I have done. I have found that my printer, when I use the mechanism built into the system in the menus to remove the filament, there's always this little sliver that eventually gets jammed and I have to tear it apart and clean it. So now I use the preheat mode. I press down a little bit, I push some filament through, so I'm pushing down, and then when I see filament coming out, then I just pop it up, and it's kind of like doing a cold pull, and my filament's removed clean. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, because in a moment I'm going to tear apart the printer. There you can see I push down, a little bit of filament's coming out, and pop. Now I've got a nice clean cold pull, and there's no garbage in there for the next time I go to unload the filament. Just a cool trick I've found using the Replicator 2X. This modification for our experimental printer is a glass bed. Now initially I tightened the screws down as far as I could, and the glass bed did not give me enough space between the carriage and the printer, so let me show you how I fixed that. So here we are looking at the side of the carriage, and if I get this as low as I can, you can just barely see the tiny little washers that I placed between the metal block and the plastic carriage. I added 2 of these tiny brass washers, and it raised it up probably 2 millimeters, so then I could get the exact right distance for my bed. Now my glass is kind of funny. It is actually tile like you would use in a house, and I just had a stack of it, so I cut off a piece, and so far it's been working like a champ. Let me also explain this goofy piece right here. I've had trouble with this extruder collecting plastic dust, so I actually broke off a small paintbrush and crimped it down and stuffed it between there so it actually cleans the gear as it spins. I'm not sure if my mechanism for removing the plastic has helped more, or if that little device has helped more, but I have been able to keep my 2X printing well more often than not using this system. So here I have it dismantled, so you can see the 2 little brass washers I put on each side. So if you're looking to do this modification, you need to remove these 4 screws, and then I always clip them together so that they don't fall apart. Simple hex wrench gets them loose, and then underneath here, right on this edge and right on this edge, is a carriage bolt, and I remove it with this little star screw so that I can get those in, and then I put in those little brass washers. The only reason I use my 2 brass washers is because that's what I had around. And now I'm going to calibrate the bed. I love that this has a manual bed. That's what allows us to put the glass bed in there, is by simply adjusting this height and lowering those springs down as low as you can. Bam, we got a glass bed in the Replicator 2X. So there it is, working with glass, and I'm doing dual extrusion. You can see that it prints a layer of the filament from the right extruder, and then it chases it with a layer from the left extruder, which is where I've got the black. Alright, so here is my Replicator 2. You can see that it also has my custom spool technique for the filament. Makes changing filament so much easier. I use tape on my bed. I have printed before without it, but I do prefer having the tape there. And now let's move over to the software and see how we start a print to actually go. Alright friends, so if you've got a Replicator 2, you've probably been printing on the Makerbot desktop. You could also be using Makerbot Print, but I have not switched over with my Replicator 2 or my 2X. Let me just walk you through how this works. You can add a file. I am going to add the bear that Megan chose, and then I'll show you why I created bear supported. And then when we're done, I'll actually show you how to make the supports. So when you bring an item in, that's the view mode. This is the move mode. This lets you rotate it. So see, I'm moving it. I want to just click the button though, and I want to reset its rotation back to normal. So you can just adjust, or you can click and bring in the details as well. This is the scale tool. You can set a percent, so you can just say 70%. You can also only scale one direction. Say you want to make it look like a wide, long dachshund instead of a bear. Let's say I make that 90, and that's the Z. So I'm going to reset the scale, and I'm going to change the X, I believe. Still got uniform shut off, and make that 100. Nope, that made him budgy. I'll get it yet. So reset, and no matter what you can fiddle with and adjust, you can also just grab him and adjust too, if you are not worried about exact numbers. If you're new to 3D printing, let me tell you about a few issues this is going to have. 3D prints on an FDM machine where the filament extrudes in layers, this works just great until it gets to here, where all of a sudden there's a layer in thin air. Now, the more highly tuned you have your printer, the more likely it is to be successful. But there are still parts out here, like this nose and the mouth, where it is just not possible for the print to be good. So what you can do is go into settings, and you can turn on support. If you're having trouble getting it to attach, you can add raft. You can also change your infill, which gives you more success when you're trying to make a heavier shape or a more solid shape. When it comes time to print, I've got mine wired up via USB, so I can just hit print. I could also hit export and put it on an SD card. The nice thing about that is if I shut down the computer, the print can just run until it's complete, and there's no need to worry about the computer anymore. A moment ago, I mentioned the supported dog. Watch this. I'm going to add the bear that's supported by Megan. And this, oops, I do not want to scale it. I'm going to go back to move mode. This was put in Mesh Mixer, and I asked for it to check for overhangs and add the support. And using the settings here where I had a support, it works as well, but it's not as efficient with the plastic. And I always like to try and save plastic. So that's what I did to make mine print better. And that's where, if you look on Thingiverse, you'll see shapes where I've uploaded those supports. So if people want them, they can have them. Let me run you through Autodesk Mesh Mixer really quick. When you choose import, find the project that you want to adjust. I'm going to bring in this fun little doggy bank that one of my 6th graders created. When I've got a shape in, the first thing that I do is transform it to a size I'm willing to print. This one is in my 70mm range, where I tell the kids I'll go 70 by 70 by 50. So that one is acceptable. Once I do that, I go to analysis and I run the inspector. And this does a quick peek to see if the object was built with all kinds of solid pieces, and this one was. So when I'm done with that, I can go down to overhangs. And this is where it takes a peek at all the spots that are overhanging. It shows you them with the red. And then I have actually adjusted my support generator. I've got it set to a max angle of 45. I've got a density of 3, so that means I don't have a lot of supports. I want them to be 3mm layers. The post I want 5mm thick. I want the tip 0.5mm, and I want the base diameter 8. So then when I hit generate support, it quickly whips together the supports for the shape that I'm looking at. And then I can take a look at them and see if I agree with everything they're doing. And I generally do agree with this one, but just to show you, I'm going to hit S for select mode.
And when I click on pieces, I can say, you know what, I really don't want that. And I can hit delete and get rid of some supports. Now this one, that would not print well if I did that, so that's a bad choice. So I'm just going to hit escape, and I'm going to cancel out of this little fella anyway. But if I did like the supports, what I do is do File Export, and then I put them in the same place I always do, but I put supported after them. Mesh Mixer is totally free, and it's quite epic, and this is just one of the things you can do with it. It also just happens to be my favorite thing I can do with it.
So that's all I have for you on this Makerbot edition of the ModTech Minute. Thank you so much for tuning in, and looking forward to seeing you again next week.